The crumpled photograph in my hand felt as brittle as the memories it held. It was taken 10 years ago, in a bustling Marrakesh souk, Daniel and I laughing, dust motes dancing in the golden afternoon sun. He'd been charming, witty, the kind of man who made you feel like the only woman in the world, even amidst the cacophony of the market. We were both travel writers then, young and reckless, our lives a whirlwind of exotic locales and fleeting connections. Now, at 44, the thrill of that shared adventure felt distant, yet the ache of his memory remained stubbornly vivid. He'd promised to call, to stay in touch. He didn't. I focused on my work, filling my life with new journeys, new faces, but he was always there, lurking at the edges of my consciousness. A ghost in the bustling cities, a phantom in tranquil landscapes. I'd find myself wondering what he was doing, if he ever thought of me, if our time together had meant anything to him at all. The not knowing was a constant hum in the background of my life, a reminder that some wounds never fully heal. Then, 6 months ago, an email. A simple, almost apologetic message. He was in Florence, working on a new book. He'd seen a picture of me on a travel blog, the one where I was scaling a mountain in Patagonia, looking impossibly small against the vast, snow-capped peaks. He'd mentioned he was married, had been for 5 years. A wife, a child. He didn't apologize for his absence, only for the fact that my image had triggered a wave of intense nostalgia, a regret so profound it had shaken him. His words were carefully chosen, a balancing act between confession and evasion. He said he'd always remembered me. That stung more than any outright rejection ever could. Because he remembered, yet he didn't reach out sooner. He had a life now, a comfortable existence built on a foundation of commitment, and my memory, the memory of that passionate, fleeting connection, was relegated to a wistful footnote. I felt like a relic of his past, a reminder of a time when he was younger, freer, and more reckless. A time before he'd settled into the responsibilities of marriage and fatherhood. I replied, briefly, professionally. I wished him well. I deleted the email. But the photograph, however, remained. A tangible reminder of a past that, despite the intervening years and his marriage, still held the power to unsettle me. Perhaps it's the lingering sense of what might have been, the ghost of a life not lived, a love that flickered brightly but then was quickly extinguished. Or maybe it's simply the inherent human desire to know we've left a mark, that some things, some people, truly cannot forget us, even if that forgetting is precisely what allows them to build a life separate from ours. As I sat there, staring at the photograph, I couldn't help but wonder what my life would be like if Daniel and I had stayed together. Would we have built a life filled with love, laughter, and adventure? Or would we have succumbed to the pressures of our careers, the distances between us, and the demands of our own personal ambitions? The what-ifs swirled in my mind like a vortex, pulling me under with their relentless questions. I've traveled the world, seeking escape and adventure. But in the end, I realized, I'm still trapped by this bittersweet memory, my own unacknowledged footnote in his life. The more I traveled, the more I felt like I was running away from the ghosts of my past, from the memories that haunted me. But the truth is, you can't escape your memories, no matter how far you roam. They're a part of you, a part of your story, and they shape you into the person you are today. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, I found myself thinking about Daniel more and more. I wondered if he was happy, if his marriage was fulfilling, if his child had brought him joy. I wondered if he ever thought about me, if he ever regretted not staying in touch. The questions swirled in my mind like a storm, refusing to subside. One day, I found myself in Florence, standing in front of the Duomo, feeling the warm sun on my skin and the cool breeze in my hair. I'd come to Italy to work on a new project, to immerse myself in the beauty and history of this ancient city. But as I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was also here to confront my past, to face the memories that had haunted me for so long. I decided to take a walk along the Arno, to clear my head and gather my thoughts. The river flowed gently, its waters reflecting the beauty of the city. I walked for hours, lost in my thoughts, until I found myself at a small cafe, sipping a cup of coffee and watching the world go by. That's when I saw him. Daniel. Sitting across the square, sipping a cup of coffee and staring at me with a look of shock and wonder. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, like all the air had been sucked out of me. I didn't know what to do, what to say. All I could do was sit there, frozen in time, as the world around me melted away. He got up, walked towards me, and sat down at my table. We sat there in silence for a long time, just looking at each other, the past and present colliding in a swirl of emotions. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Laura," he said, his eyes locked on mine. "I've thought about you every day since I saw that picture of you in Patagonia. I've thought about what could have been, what should have been. I've thought about the choices I made, the choices I didn't make." I looked at him, my heart racing, my mind reeling. I didn't know what to say, what to do. All I knew was that I was face to face with my past, with the ghost who had haunted me for so long. "What do you want, Daniel?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a deep sadness. "I want to know that you're okay," he said. "I want to know that you've found happiness, that you've found love. I want to know that I didn't hurt you too badly, that you've been able to move on." I looked at him, my heart heavy with emotion. I didn't know what to say, what to do. All I knew was that I was face to face with my past, with the man who had broken my heart, with the man who had changed my life forever. "I'm okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've found happiness, I've found love. But I've never forgotten you, Daniel. I've never forgotten the way you made me feel, the way you touched my heart." He looked at me, his eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Laura," he said. "I'm sorry for hurting you, for leaving you. I'm sorry for not staying in touch, for not being there for you." I looked at him, my heart heavy with emotion. I didn't know what to say, what to do. All I knew was that I was face to face with my past, with the man who had broken my heart, with the man who had changed my life forever. "It's okay, Daniel," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've forgiven you. I've moved on. But I'll never forget you, I'll never forget the way you made me feel." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a deep sadness. "I'll never forget you either, Laura," he said. "I'll never forget the way you made me feel, the way you touched my heart." We sat there in silence for a long time, just looking at each other, the past and present colliding in a swirl of emotions. Finally, he stood up, and I stood up with him. We hugged each other tightly, the tears streaming down our faces. "I'm glad I saw you, Laura," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm glad I got to see you again, to talk to you again." I looked at him, my heart heavy with emotion. "Me too, Daniel," I said. "Me too." As we pulled away from each other, I knew that this was goodbye, that this was the end of an era. I knew that I would never see Daniel again, that I would never touch his heart again. But I also knew that I was okay, that I was happy, that I had found love. As I walked away from the cafe, I felt a sense of closure, a sense of peace. I knew that I had finally laid the past to rest, that I had finally found the closure I had been seeking for so long. I knew that I would always carry Daniel with me, that he would always be a part of me. But I also knew that I was ready to move on, to start a new chapter in my life. The crumpled photograph in my hand felt as brittle as the memories it held. But as I looked at it, I knew that it was no longer a reminder of heartache and pain. It was a reminder of love, of passion, of the beauty and complexity of the human heart. It was a reminder that even though we may not always get the happily ever after we desire, we can still find happiness, still find love. As I walked away from the cafe, I knew that I was ready to start a new journey, a journey of self-discovery and growth. I knew that I would always carry the memories of Daniel with me, but I also knew that I was ready to create new memories, to find new love, to live a new life. The photograph in my hand felt like a weight, a burden that I had carried for so long. But as I looked at it, I knew that it was no longer a source of pain. It was a source of strength, a reminder of the power of love and the human heart.